Segment 1. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is a psychological manipulation tactic where someone causes you to question your own perception of reality. It often involves persistent denial, misdirection, contradiction, and lying, all designed to make you doubt your memory, perception, or sanity. Imagine you're at a family reunion. Your cousin keeps making subtle comments that leave you feeling uneasy. He tells you that you're overreacting when you mention an uncomfortable conversation you had, even though you distinctly remember it. Later, when you try to bring it up again, he insists he never said it. Over time, you start questioning your own memory and perception, thinking that maybe you were just imagining things. You don't realize that he's been gaslighting you, manipulating you to doubt yourself. Segment 2. Brainwashing. Brainwashing, also known as thought reform, is a process in which your beliefs, values, and perceptions are manipulated through intense persuasion. The goal is to create a new belief system or identity, often by isolating you from outside influences and breaking down your sense of self. You're invited to a weekend retreat, promised to offer enlightenment. Little do you know, it's a front for a cult. The leader of the group is charismatic and isolates you from your family and friends, feeding you false revelations. Over the course of weeks, you start believing in the cult's philosophy, discredit your former life, and adopt the group's values. Your old life and relationships now seem trivial, and you've been brainwashed into following the leader's every word. Segment 3. The illusion of choice. The illusion of choice is a psychological trick where you believe you are making a free decision, but in reality, your options are limited or controlled. It's often used in consumer settings to make you feel empowered while subtly steering you towards a predetermined outcome. You walk into a supermarket, scanning the cereal aisle. There are dozens of brands to choose from, each claiming to be the healthiest or tastiest. You spend several minutes picking the best one, but what you don't know is that all these cereals come from the same parent company. The supermarket offers so many choices to give you the illusion of freedom, when in fact, the options are all controlled by one corporation. You think you're making an independent decision, but you've been subtly steered toward one brand, regardless of the choices. Segment 4. The foot in the door technique. The foot in the door technique involves agreeing to a small request, which makes you more likely to agree to a larger related request later. The principle is based on the idea that you're more likely to comply with a larger request once you've already said yes to a smaller one. You're walking down the street when a stranger stops you and asks if you can spare a minute to fill out a quick survey for a charity. You agree, as it's only a minute. A few days later, the same stranger approaches you again, now asking for a $50 donation to the charity. Because you already agreed to the small survey request, you feel a sense of obligation and say yes to the donation. This is the foot in the door technique, where a small commitment leads to a larger one. Segment 5. The door in the face technique. The door in the face technique is the opposite of foot in the door. In this case, you start with an unreasonable request, expecting it to be rejected, and then follow it up with a more reasonable request. The contrast makes the second request seem more acceptable. A salesperson shows you a luxury model, priced at $100,000, and you immediately decline, stating it's far beyond your budget. Then, the salesperson shows you a more reasonable model, priced at $40,000. Compared to the luxury model, the second car seems like a great deal, and you agree to buy it. You don't realize that the salesperson used the door in the face technique to make you feel like you're getting a better deal. Segment 6. Social proof. Social proof is a psychological phenomenon where you tend to follow the actions of others, assuming that if many people are doing something, it must be the right thing. It's the concept of safety in numbers. If others are doing it, it must be trustworthy or correct. You're walking through the city and see a restaurant with a long line outside. Curious, you join the line, assuming that because so many people are waiting, the restaurant must serve delicious food. What you don't know is that the line was actually created to make the place look more popular than it really is. This is an example of social proof, where you, like many others, follow the crowd, believing that the large number of people waiting outside indicates the quality of the restaurant. Segment 7. Scarcity. Scarcity is a psychological trick that plays on our fear of missing out. When we perceive that something is in short supply, we tend to value it more and feel a stronger urge to act quickly. This scarcity principle is often used in marketing to drive sales. You're shopping in a clothing store when you see a sign that says, "Only 2 items left in your size." Immediately, you feel a sense of urgency, even though you hadn't planned on buying the item. You grab it, thinking that if you don't act now, you might miss out. The truth is, the store likely has more stock, but by creating the illusion of scarcity, they've manipulated you into buying the item sooner than you otherwise would have. Segment 8. Authority dash. Authority is a powerful psychological influence. People are more likely to trust and obey those they perceive to be in positions of authority. This principle is often used in marketing, advertising, and even social interactions to persuade others to follow advice or commands. You're feeling unwell and visit your doctor. The doctor, dressed in a white coat and carrying a stethoscope, tells you that you need a prescription for a certain medication. Even though you have doubts, you follow the doctor's advice without question, trusting their authority. This is an example of how authority figures can influence your decisions, making you more likely to comply with their recommendations. Segment 9. Reciprocity. Reciprocity is a principle that suggests when someone does something for us, we feel a psychological obligation to return the favor. This is a tactic used frequently in marketing and sales to build goodwill and encourage future purchases. You're at the mall when a salesperson offers you a free sample of perfume. You don't particularly need it, but the salesperson's friendly demeanor makes you feel obligated to take it. Later, when the salesperson offers you a bottle at a discount, you buy it, even though you hadn't planned on making a purchase. This is the reciprocity principle at work. The free sample created a sense of obligation in you, prompting you to buy the perfume. Segment 10. Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance occurs when you hold 2 contradictory beliefs, or when your actions conflict with your beliefs. This mental discomfort motivates you to resolve the conflict by changing your thoughts or behaviors, often in ways that justify your original actions. You buy a concert ticket for $200, thinking it will be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. However, when you attend the concert, you realize the performance is lackluster and not as amazing as you expected. Instead of admitting that you made a poor choice, you convince yourself that the concert was actually worth the price, telling yourself it was still an enjoyable night. This is cognitive dissonance. Feeling uncomfortable with the idea of spending so much for a bad experience, so you change your perception to make it seem worth it. Segment 11. The halo effect. The halo effect occurs when one positive characteristic of a person, such as attractiveness or charm, influences your overall judgment of them. You tend to assume that because someone is good in one area, they must be good in all areas. You attend a corporate event where you meet the CEO, a charismatic and handsome person. Because of their appearance and confidence, you assume they are also highly intelligent, kind, and capable, even though you have no direct evidence to support these assumptions. This is the halo effect, where one positive trait, like charm or attractiveness, leads to an overall positive perception of the person. Segment 12. The false consensus effect. The false consensus effect is the tendency for you to overestimate the extent to which others share your opinions, beliefs, and preferences. This bias leads you to believe that your viewpoint is more common than it actually is. You and your co-workers are having a heated discussion about a controversial topic. Most of the group agrees with you, so you assume that everyone must share your viewpoint. Later, you find out that the majority of the office disagrees with you. You had fallen prey to the false consensus effect, believing that because your group agreed, everyone must think the same way. Segment 13. The primacy effect. The primacy effect is a cognitive bias that causes you to remember the first piece of information you received more clearly than subsequent information. When meeting someone new, your first impression tends to stick, regardless of their actions later. You meet someone for the first time at a networking event. They give a firm handshake, speak confidently, and seem knowledgeable. Even though their behavior later might not live up to that first impression, you continue to view them positively, as the first impression left a strong mark on your perception. Segment 14. The recency effect. The recency effect is similar to the primacy effect, but it involves the tendency to remember the most recent information better than earlier information. This bias often affects how you perceive events or people based on the last things you heard or saw. You're at a conference where multiple speakers present throughout the day. The final speaker delivers an exceptional, compelling presentation. When you reflect on the event later, you find that you remember the last speaker's talk the most, even though the others had been insightful as well. The recency effect leads you to weigh the last experience more heavily in your memory. Segment 15. The anchoring effect. The anchoring effect occurs when you rely too heavily on the first piece of information you receive when making decisions. It often distorts your judgment, making subsequent information seem more reasonable by comparison. You enter a store and see a suit priced at $1,000. While you hesitate, a salesperson shows you another suit priced at $500, saying it's a great deal. Because of the high initial price of the first suit, you perceive the $500 suit as a bargain. The anchor price of $1,000 has distorted your judgment, making the second suit appear more reasonable, even if it's still expensive for your budget. Segment 16. The Barnum effect. The Barnum effect, or the Forer effect, is the tendency to believe vague or general statements about yourself to be highly accurate, even if they could apply to anyone. This effect is often seen in horoscopes, personality tests, and fortune-telling. You read your horoscope and find that it contains statements like, "You have a great need for others to like and admire you." You feel that it perfectly describes your personality. However, this is a general statement that could apply to almost anyone, and yet you believe it to be specifically true for you due to the Barnum effect. Segment 17. The Pygmalion effect. The Pygmalion effect is the phenomenon where higher expectations lead to an increase in performance. It is a form of self-fulfilling prophecy, where the belief in someone's potential can encourage them to achieve more. Your teacher tells you that they have high expectations for you this semester, believing you have the potential to excel. As a result, You put more effort into your studies, perform better, and eventually live up to their expectations. The belief in your ability led you to perform better, making the Pygmalion effect a powerful force in shaping behavior and outcomes. Segment 18. The self-serving bias. The self-serving bias is the tendency to attribute your successes to your own abilities and efforts, while blaming external factors for your failures. This bias helps to protect your self-esteem and maintain a positive view of yourself. You just finished a major project at work, and it was a huge success. You immediately credit your hard work, dedication, and brilliant strategy for the successful outcome. However, when a similar project fails, you quickly blame it on external factors such as poor team cooperation or lack of resources. You don't recognize that the failure may have also been due to your own mistakes or shortcomings. This is the self-serving bias, where you take credit for successes and externalize failures. Segment 19. The Just World Hypothesis. The just world hypothesis is the belief that the world is fundamentally just, and people get what they deserve. This belief can lead you to justify unfair situations or victim blaming. You hear about someone losing their job due to a sudden cut in company funding. You think to yourself, they must have done something wrong for this to happen. Even though the person was laid off due to no fault of their own, you assume that the world must be fair and that everyone gets what they deserve. This is the just world hypothesis, believing that bad things happen to people because they somehow deserve it, even when it's not the case. Segment 20. The sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy occurs when you continue to invest time, money, or effort into something because you've already invested so much, even though it no longer serves your best interest. You're watching a movie, but it's not enjoyable. The plot is weak, and the acting is subpar. However, because you've already watched 90 minutes of the film, you convince yourself to stick it out and finish it. Even though continuing the movie isn't adding any value to your experience, you feel compelled to finish it because of the time you've already spent on it. This is the sunk cost fallacy, continuing an endeavor simply because of the resources already invested, rather than rationally assessing whether it's worth continuing. Segment 21. The Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias where people with limited knowledge or skills in a particular area tend to overestimate their ability. The less competent they are, the more confident they feel in their abilities. You're learning a new language, and after a few lessons, you feel that you've mastered it. When speaking to native speakers, you're overly confident about your fluency, despite making numerous errors. Because your knowledge is still shallow, you don't realize how much more you need to learn. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect, overestimating your competence in an area where you actually lack expertise. Segment 22. The false memory effect. The false memory effect occurs when you vividly recall an event that never actually happened or misremember certain details about an event. Our memories are not as reliable as we think, and they can be influenced by outside sources. You distinctly remember a childhood incident where your parents took you to the zoo and bought you your favorite ice cream. However, as you grow older, you discover that your family never went to the zoo during that time. What's happened is that your mind created a false memory, mixing up events from different times in your life. The false memory effect has led you to believe in an event that never occurred. Segment 23. The illusory superiority effect. The illusory superiority effect is the tendency to believe that you are better than the average person at something, even when that's not true. You consider yourself an excellent driver, far superior to others on the road, You may even feel that you're a safer, more responsible driver than most people. However, when you look at the statistics, it becomes clear that you are, in fact, average, or maybe even below average. The illusory superiority effect has distorted your self-perception, making you believe you're better than others, when, in reality, you are not. Segment 24. The availability heuristic. The availability heuristic is a mental shortcut where you make decisions or judgments based on the information that is most readily available to you, often overestimating the probability of an event. After hearing about a recent plane crash on the news, you start to feel anxious about flying. Even though flying is statistically safer than driving, the dramatic news story about the crash makes you believe that the risk of flying is higher than it actually is. The availability heuristic has led you to base your judgment on vivid, easily accessible information, rather than the actual probabilities. Segment 25. The in-group bias. The in-group bias is the tendency to favor people who belong to the same group as you, whether it's a social group, a team, or even a political affiliation. You're part of a close-knit social group that frequently hangs out together. When discussing a new member who has recently joined the group, you find yourself automatically defending them, even when they've made mistakes, simply because they belong to your group. This is the in-group bias, where you are more likely to overlook faults and favor those within your own group. Segment 26. The outgroup homogeneity bias. The outgroup homogeneity bias is the tendency to perceive members of other groups as being more similar to each other than they actually are. You often attribute negative qualities to people outside your group without considering their individuality. You're part of a sports team, and when you face off against an opposing team, you assume that all players on the other team are aggressive and unskilled. Based on previous experiences, you fail to recognize that the other team members each have their own unique skills and personalities. The outgroup homogeneity bias leads you to generalize and stereotype those who are outside your own group. Segment 27. The bandwagon effect. The bandwagon effect is a psychological phenomenon where you adopt a belief or behavior because it's popular, not because you genuinely believe in it. You see a new fashion trend gaining popularity. Everyone in your social circle is wearing it, and even celebrities have embraced it. Despite not initially liking the trend, you decide to buy into it, simply because it's becoming widespread. The bandwagon effect makes you feel like you must follow the trend to fit in, even if it doesn't align with your personal style. Segment 28. The contrast effect. The contrast effect occurs when you compare two things in a way that makes one seem better than the other, even if both are similar in quality. You visit a car dealership and see two cars, one priced at $40,000 and another priced at $25,000. The $40,000 car seems far too expensive. But when you compare it to the $25,000 car, it seems like a much better deal, even though both cars are similar in terms of features and quality. The contrast effect has made you perceive the $25,000 car as a better deal by comparing it to the higher price car. Segment 29. The spotlight effect. The spotlight effect is the tendency to believe that everyone is paying attention to you and noticing your mistakes or embarrassing moments, even when they are not. You trip and fall while walking into a meeting and immediately feel like everyone in the room is staring at you. You think they're all focused on your mistake, but in reality, most people are too busy with their own thoughts and tasks to even notice. The spotlight effect makes you believe that you're the center of attention, when in reality, others are often not as focused on you as you think. Segment 30. The negativity bias. The negativity bias is the tendency to give more weight to negative experiences or feedback than to positive ones. It's a natural survival mechanism, but it can distort your perception of situations. You receive 10 compliments on your presentation at work, but focus on the one piece of critical feedback you received. Despite the overall positive reaction, you find yourself dwelling on the criticism, making it seem far worse than it really was. The negativity bias has led you to give more weight to the negative feedback, even when the positive feedback far outweighs it. Segment 31. The fading affect bias. The fading affect bias is the phenomenon where emotional reactions to negative events diminish over time, making past negative experiences seem less impactful than they once were. You reflect on a past relationship that ended in heartbreak. While you still feel some sadness, the intensity of your emotions has decreased over time. The anger and frustration you felt at the time of the breakup seem less significant now, and you only remember the good moments. This is the fading affect bias, where negative feelings fade with time, making past experiences seem less painful. Segment 32. The misattribution of arousal. The misattribution of arousal occurs when you misinterpret the source of your emotions, often attributing feelings of excitement or anxiety to the wrong cause. You're on a thrilling roller coaster ride, feeling your heart race and adrenaline surge. When the ride ends, you find yourself sitting next to someone you just met, and you feel an unexpected sense of attraction toward them. In reality, the excitement you feel is a result of the thrilling ride, but you mistakenly attribute your emotional response to the person sitting next to you. This is the misattribution of arousal, where your feelings of excitement are misattributed to something else.